Since it's now 1:30, we'll go ahead and jump right in. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Jessica Golden, and I am an outreach officer for the Green Municipal Fund at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I'll be the moderator for today's session. Today's webinar is the second of 5 days of interactive webinars covering the many ways we, the Green Municipal Fund, can help you plan, design, and implement local sustainability projects. Today, we will be focusing on our new $300 million Sustainable Affordable Housing Initiative. Whether you want to complete an energy-efficient retrofit or engage in a new capital project, let's find out how the SAW Fund can help you increase the quality, affordability, and energy efficiency of your buildings. If you have colleagues who are missing today's webinar, this session is being recorded and will be available online in a few weeks' time. Before learning more on making affordable housing sustainable, a quick reminder to please send us your questions using the questions and chat function. We will respond at the end of the presentation and we'll aim to move through as many questions as possible during the remaining time. Without further ado, let me introduce today's speakers, my colleagues Jen Arntfield and Benjamin Koczwarski. Jen is the lead on the Sustainable Affordable Housing Initiative, while Benjamin is an outreach advisor for FCM programs. Jen and Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you to everyone who took the time today. I hope that you've all been staying safe during this challenging time. Ben, do you want to just go to the next slide? Thanks. So we're so excited to be able to tell you about our new funding offer that launched just over a month ago. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're joining you today from Ottawa, which is on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. So as Jessica mentioned, I'm the lead of Sustainable Affordable Housing here at the Green Municipal Fund, and I led the development of this new program. And I'm joined by my colleague Benjamin, who's leading our outreach with applicants for this offer. Next. Briefly, this is an overview of what we're going to cover today. I'll let you know a little bit about who we are here at FCM and the Green Municipal Fund. And then we'll spend most of our time going over our new funding offer and giving you all the information that you need to apply. We'll also reserve time at the end of the session for questions. I'm sure many of you are familiar with us, but for those that may not know FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has been the national voice of municipal government since 1901. We have nearly 2,000 members across the country, representing more than 90% of Canada's population. FCM advocates to the federal government on behalf of municipalities and also delivers programming to help municipalities tackle local challenges. Our largest program is the Green Municipal Fund, or GMF. It was established in the year 2000 through an endowment from the federal government, and it is managed by FCM with oversight from Infrastructure Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Natural Resources Canada. Next. GMF is a leading program in driving local green innovation across the country through training, resources, and funding. This year, we celebrate 20 years of exceptional sustainability initiatives. To date, GMF has invested nearly $900 million in over 1,300 projects, resulting in a reduction of 2.6 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions, which is the equivalent of taking 594,000 cars off the road. In 2019, the federal budget significantly expanded the work of GMF through a $950 million investment in 3 new streams of programming focused on increasing energy efficiency in residences, large community buildings, and affordable housing units. Community Efficiency Financing is a fund that supports municipalities in establishing local programs for homeowners to complete energy retrofits. An initial offer for this program launched in March, and there's a webinar about that program next Monday if you're interested in more information. And the LC3 FCM Community Climate Action Fund is still in development. It will support low carbon solutions in large community buildings and infrastructure. And finally, $300 million was allocated for sustainable affordable housing. In its 20 years, GMF has funded some local affordable housing projects, as you'll see as we go through this presentation. However, this investment significantly expands our capacity to do so and has created a stream of funding that is focused on and designed to meet the needs of affordable housing projects specifically. Between last March and this May, we worked to develop a program that will fill a gap in funding for the affordable housing sector. The development of this offer involves significant stakeholder engagement and was largely informed by an advisory group of affordable housing experts currently working in the sector, including municipal, nonprofit, and cooperative representation. The $300 million allocation is intended to fund projects over the next 7 years through approximately $52 million dispersed in loans and grants annually. This funding has been designed in consideration of other potential funding sources available for affordable housing projects and is stackable with CMHC's National Housing Strategy programs, as well as other federal, provincial, or territorial and municipal funding. Our funding will also support capacity building activities, which we'll speak to later in the presentation. Overall, these are the objectives that the Sustainable Affordable Housing Fund is aiming to achieve. As part of the Green Municipal Fund, environmental objectives are at the core of this program. However, we also want to ensure that the environmental projects that we fund reduce utility and operating costs and have positive social benefits. We're also aiming to increase the capacity of the sector to take on these types of green projects through capacity building and supporting other sector organizations. For an organization to be eligible for our funding, the lead applicant must be either a municipal government, a municipally owned corporation, or a nonprofit housing provider or cooperative. Nonprofit housing providers include those delivering transitional housing, supportive housing, or non-market rental housing. Generally, we're looking for buildings that are owned and operated by one of these organizations. Federal, provincial, and territorial organizations, as well as private for-profit developers, are not eligible for funding. GMF has traditionally primarily focused on municipalities and municipal organizations. However, for this affordable housing offer, we recognize the importance of nonprofits in the delivery of this community benefit. For their application, eligible non-municipal organizations will require the support of their municipality. For a project to be eligible for funding, we have both energy efficiency and an affordability requirement. Where possible, to simplify things for applicants who may be applying to more than one funder, we have aligned to the criteria of the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. From an affordability perspective, rents for at least 30% of the units of a project must be less than 80% of the local median market rent. This requirement must be maintained for the duration of the contract with FCM. Retrofit projects must aim to achieve at least a 25% reduction in energy consumption, while new build projects must aim to achieve net zero energy ready or net zero energy. For either retrofits or new builds, we're not prescriptive in terms of the methods or standards used to achieve these thresholds. And while we will accept a portfolio of projects in an application, each project will be required to meet these thresholds themselves. Next. The Sustainable Affordable Housing Offer has funding to support your project at any stage, from initial inception through construction. So I'll now pass it over to Benjamin to give you the details on what's available for each of these stages of funding.
Thanks, Jen, and thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon. It's great to see such a high level of interest in the fund, and we really are proud to be able to share the details of this new funding offer with you today. It's important to mention that the funding that's available and identified on your screen here is available at different stages of the same retrofit or new construction project. So whether you're retrofitting a building to reduce energy consumption by 25%, or you're building a new project, you have access to the same stages of funding available through the program. So you can apply for a planning grant and then follow on with an application for a study grant, followed by a pilot project or a capital project, depending on the needs of your initiative. So I'll go through the different stages of funding that are available through the program to demonstrate how each of these stages can help you move forward with an eligible project. And remember that this funding is available for eligible applicants, whether they're municipal housing corporations, whether they are nonprofit or cooperative housing providers, as long as the building is an affordable housing development. To get started with a project, we offer a planning grant of up to $25,000 for up to 80% of the eligible costs of the development of a concept for a project that will help get an energy efficient project off the ground. The key function of the planning grant is to embed the environmental performance at the outset of your project. It tremendously improves the chances of success of a project if you think about the energy outcomes early on in the design. So the purpose of this planning grant is to enable you to begin developing a project considering the environment right at the inception stages. Eligible activities that could be completed at this stage include public engagement activities. If you want to interview community members who live in the building, they could include initial contact with professionals to give an idea about project scoping. Any activity that you really need to complete to get started with the project. Ideally, at the end of the planning stage, you're well geared up to apply for further funding, either through a GMF study grant or through other funding programs that exist out there, such as CMHC seed funding or co-investment funding for studies. The study grant is funding that's available following on from the planning grant. We can offer up to $175,000 in matching funds for up to 50% of the eligible costs of a project. The purpose of a study is to analyze the different energy efficiency options available in your building, whether it's a new build or a retrofit, in detail, to determine exactly what the energy outcomes will be. These could either be through a sophisticated energy model, or in the case of a retrofit, through calculations that demonstrate the kinds of retrofits that you can do in order to achieve energy savings and long-term cost savings as well. It's important to note that other feasibility work can also be covered in the feasibility study process. So if you need to do a financial analysis of the financial viability of the project, if you need to determine some long-term costings, if there's any other work that you need to do to demonstrate that the project is viable, you can include that in the scope of work here and be reimbursed up to 50% of the value of the feasibility study. And here's an example of a study that was funded through the GMF core offer, which was the pre-existing offer that Jen mentioned that offered funding to a limited number of affordable housing projects prior to the inception of the SAW program. It is for a 254 new construction project in downtown Ottawa, created by the Centertown Citizens Ottawa Corporation. And it includes a lot of really interesting energy efficiency technologies. It includes a geothermal heat exchange system to reduce overall energy costs for heating and cooling, but it also has an innovative design to eliminate thermal bridging between the buildings and their balconies. So a lot of heat tends to be lost through the extension of balconies off of residential units. And so this building was able to offer their residents some balcony space, which is always desirable, without a lot of the associated heat loss through innovative design. FCM was able to offer a grant of $42,000 for a total study budget of $100,000. And overall, looking at the quote here at the bottom of the page, the success of the Beaver Barracks project demonstrates that the affordable housing sector can innovate in energy efficiency. There is a case study available on our website, so if you'd like to visit our website and read a little bit more about this project, there's a lot of good lessons learned available there. Once you've developed the project concept and gone into detail through the study phase, it's possible that you may find that there's a need to do a pilot project to evaluate certain innovative aspects of the project at a small scale before you roll it out across your portfolio. For that, we offer a grant of up to $500,000 for up to 80% of the costs of a small scale test that puts into effect an innovative high environmental performance concept in a limited number of units. So either a limited number of new constructed units or renovations to a limited number of your existing portfolio in order to confirm that the approach will work on site. And generally, a pilot project leads into a capital project. We don't anticipate that there will be a lot of pilot projects that need to be funded through the program, but the option is available if you want to test something that's really innovative and that could really be a game changer in terms of the energy consumption in your building portfolio. We have two different funding offers available for capital funding. They vary between retrofit financing and new construction financing. So first of all, for retrofits, we can offer funding of up to $10 million per project for up to 80% of the project costs, the total costs of the renovation, of which 25 to 50% is offered as a grant. This grant amount is determined by the energy performance achieved through the project, and I'll explain that in just a second. The purpose of this funding is to retrofit existing homes in order to save energy, but other upgrades are eligible. So just as I mentioned during the study, if there are other things that you need to do, or affordable housing providers in your community need to do in order to renovate the building, bring it up to contemporary standards, that might include accessibility upgrades, it might include limited structural upgrades, other activities that are needed in order to really renew the building and make it extend the lifespan for another 30 years or more, you can include those in the scope of work to be funded through the retrofit financing offer. It's worth mentioning that the grant amount increases with greater energy savings. So if in your study you demonstrate that the proposed set of works, whatever they may be, will reduce the energy demand in the building by, well, it must reduce it by a minimum of 25%. But if the proposed works reduce the energy demand by 35%, then 35% of the funding offered through GMF is offered as a grant, and the remainder as a low interest loan. If the energy efficiency measures reduce the building energy demand by 50% or more, then 50% of the funding offer is contributed as a grant and the remainder as a low interest loan. So this really aims to incentivize projects that achieve substantial reductions in energy versus the current baseline. And again, we base it off of what's evaluated and discussed at the study stage in order to determine the anticipated energy savings in the retrofit project. We do a fairly deep evaluation of the study to make sure that the energy outcomes are attainable and reasonable based on the proposed technologies. So it is important to have a complete and thorough study before applying for retrofit financing. And I'm happy to take any questions at the end, so please feel free to add questions in the question box or have chat in the chat box. Here's an example of a retrofit project that again was completed through the GMF core offer. It's for a retrofit of 7 existing community housing buildings that are operated by Toronto Community Housing with a total resident population of 1,500. The renovations were able to reduce the overall greenhouse gas emissions from these 7 buildings by 30%. And the majority of the renovations were actually just improvements to the mechanical systems of the building. So for example, in the study, they identified that there was a 40% heat loss due to inefficiencies in design of the ducting systems within the building. So by rebuilding the ducting systems, they were able to significantly reduce these heat losses and reduce the energy needed to heat the buildings. They also added intelligent thermostats, and on the whole, the selection of improvements that were made to these buildings enabled Toronto Community Housing to save $500,000 per year in energy expenses for these buildings. On your screen, you'll notice a combination of loan and grant at the top right-hand corner. That was the loan and grant offer available through GMF previously. Currently, we would be able to offer a larger grant amount based on the energy savings proposed in the project. And here a quick quote from Brian Purcell. By integrating design and implementation, this project cost-effectively reduced energy consumption and GHG emissions while improving tenant comfort and air quality. The last stream of funding that I have to discuss with you today is capital financing for new construction projects. Again, the offer is for up to $10 million per application for 20% of eligible costs, of which 50% is offered as a grant. And it's important to note that the program offers funding for up to 20% of eligible project costs, that is the total cost of construction, because we were aware that there are many other options for financing available through CMHC, through local programs, through the private market that can assist with the construction costs of new project development. So the 20% funding that is offered through GMF at this time is intended to offset the costs of building to the higher energy standard required by the program. In our initial research with stakeholders from the sector, we discovered that the typical range of extra costs to build to higher energy standards was between 7 and 15%. So we thought that a 20% funding offer, again, which is half grant and half loan, would be able to offset the majority of those costs and make sure that eligible providers can make those investments without having to bear the brunt of the excess cost. The purpose of the capital financing is to build new homes to a higher energy performance standard, with the target being net zero energy. Net zero energy means that the buildings are designed to be so efficient that all of the incremental energy demands created through this new construction can be resolved through on-site generation of renewable electricity. So whether that's wind turbines or solar panels on the roof or other sources of renewable or low-cost energy, such as geothermal, heat pumps, and different things, overall, what we're looking for is that you can offset the increment in energy demand for the core functions of the building through renewable energy generation that's directly related to the project. There are a range of standards out there that can illustrate ways of achieving net zero energy. Passive House is becoming more popular in Canada. There is also LEED Platinum. These different standards are not required by the program, but they give a really good indication of steps that you can take in order to achieve the energy efficiency outcomes that the program is asking for all projects that apply to it. And here's just one final example of a project that was funded through the GMF core offer. Again, it's a highly energy efficient new construction, in this case, 67 unit affordable seniors residence, independent living for seniors. They were able to achieve LEED Silver through the existing GMF core offer, of course, slightly higher standards today. But I just wanted to mention that the total budget for this project was $9.7 million, and they came to GMF for just about $1.2 million. In the old offer, it was offered at $1,090,000 as a loan and $100,000 as a grant. Today, we'd be able to offer a 50-50 grant loan split to cover that amount of money that's requested from the program. So here's a summary page. It's been a lot, but I hope you might want to take a screenshot of this page because it really does give a great overview of the funding offer as it's available. Overall, what we're really trying to do through this program is help affordable housing providers and municipal housing companies to be able to move in a clear and coherent process through the different steps of development. So starting with planning, moving through a study, and then into a project as appropriate. We have funding available for all stages. I know someone will ask, and I'll answer preemptively, you do not have to go through each stage of the process to be eligible for funding. If you find, for example, in your study that it's not possible to move forward with a capital project, that the requirements for energy efficiency may be just a little bit too high, we really appreciate that you evaluated them and you can go on with a project using other sources of funding. Certainly important to evaluate energy efficiency in detail, though, for the study grant. Similarly, if you're ready to go with a capital project and you have all the documentation that you would have produced at the study stage, we can receive that application using your existing supporting documentation and move forward from there. So I'll hand it back to Jen to talk about our evaluation criteria.
Thanks, Benjamin. So projects applying for sustainable affordable housing funding at GMF will be evaluated based on criteria within these three themes. We'll be looking for projects with high impact, which is where the triple bottom line benefits of a project will be considered. Energy and GHG emissions are the most important criteria within this theme, but it's also important to note that we recognize that there are differences in terms of size of provider, as well as regional and urban versus rural considerations that will be taken into account through the relative impact criteria. The implementation criteria really just looks for projects with strong project management and financials. And then the transformative potential criteria looks for providers that are trying new things, but are generally using proven solutions to ensure energy cost savings are realized. Next. So the evaluation criteria, as well as all of the information you need to apply, are available on our website and in detail in our application guide. To apply for planning grants, you can access a very simple application and workbook online and apply directly. Just considering the scale of this funding, we wanted to, have a equally simple kind of process to come into GMF. But for studies, pilots, and capital projects, the application is a two-step process. An initial proposal form is available online, and then when you submit your initial proposal, a project officer will confirm your eligibility and get back to you with the full application and workbook within 15 business days. However, the full details as to what's contained in the full application, just so you know what to expect for the full application, are in the application guide, which is available on our website. A funding decision for planning or study grants will typically take 2 to 3 months, while a funding decision for a pilot or capital project will typically take 4 to 6 months. Applications will be accepted on a continuous basis until annual funds are exhausted, and then we'll make that clear through our communications and on our website. Back to you, Benjamin.
Thanks, Jen. Oh, I think I skipped a slide. Here we are. Yeah, so just to give a general sense of the supporting documents required and then the types of details we require in the evaluation. Of course, all of the details are provided in the application guide that Jen mentioned. So I really recommend at the end of the presentation visiting our website and taking a glance through the application guide. It's a fairly comprehensive document. It'll hopefully answer most of the questions that you have, but of course, I'm always happy to answer any questions that you may have related to the application. So for supporting documents, all projects, we require a copy of your organization's constating documents. That's essentially the articles of incorporation to demonstrate that the applicant is legally founded as an eligible entity, whether it's a nonprofit or a municipal corporation. We also require evidence of the local municipality support. And that, for this program, that means a letter from the mayor or from a director of department in the municipality, from the CAO, demonstrating that the city is aware that the project is taking place and that they support it, that it will bring benefits from the community. So it's really important that your municipality know of and support the project. And I know we have a number of municipal representatives on board here at the presentation today. So I hope that you'll be able to take some of this awareness back to your organizations and to community housing providers and demonstrate that the city is able to suggest you access this funding. We also require evidence of consultation with your provincial or territorial government. You can contact me for more information about how to do that, but essentially that means sending a copy of your application form to the province or territory, to the relevant authority, just so that they are aware also that you're applying for funding from GMF. For capital projects in particular, our documentation requirements are quite high. We require a complete feasibility study with an energy model or energy savings calculations in the case of a retrofit building. So it's really important to spend the time at that study stage to fully demonstrate all of the things that you're going to be doing in the capital project to demonstrate the value, the return on investment, and the energy savings that you intend to achieve. We also look for project financial documentation, including cost estimates and cost revenue projections of the building once it's complete or renovated. And because a component of the capital financing is a loan, we ask for organizational financial documentation, including 3 years of financial statements, in the same way that any private lender would ask for that kind of documentation to do their due diligence. If you have any questions about the financial requirements, we can certainly address them at the end today, or follow up in an email. A really important part of the program, and something that we are starting to roll out more and more now, is capacity building aspects of the program, including training, resources, tools, and more. The Sustainable Affordable Housing Program can help you innovate with training such as webinars, and we will have more training-oriented webinars over the coming years. Also with resources and tools such as case studies and guides. I've mentioned a number of case studies during the presentation today. We also have a series of guides that will be published in about the next month on steps towards achieving significant energy retrofits and energy efficient new construction. So you can look for their publication in the weeks to come. We also aim to offer networking opportunities and peer learning to develop a bit of a network of knowledge holders in the sustainable affordable housing sector so that people know where to turn when they've got pertinent questions about how to develop and carry out a project. You can find out all of the resources that FCM programs have available by visiting our website at fcm.ca/resources, where you'll find resources on sustainable affordable housing, as well as all of the other sector areas where FCM does its work. And that's it for the core of the presentation. Funding is now available. So please do visit our website, take a look at the funding application guide and the requirements for submission. You can access the program's website by visiting fcm.ca/sustainable affordable housing, all one word. Also invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, which gives great updates about programs. It comes about once a week, not too often. It's called FCM Connect, fcm.ca/FCM Connect. And of course, myself and members of my team are very happy to answer questions you may have about the program. Contact us by emailing gmfinfo@fcm.ca or the 1877 number listed on your screen. So thanks a lot for joining us today, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jen and Benjamin. So we have about 30 minutes to get to the questions that came in through the chat function. First, Jen, could you recap the estimated time for the different categories, please?
The times to approve a project, an application that comes in? Sure, absolutely. So the planning grants and the study grants, the typical timeline would be 2 to 3 months, whereas the pilot projects or capital projects, the typical timeline would be 4 to 6 months. But in terms of kind of relevant timeframes, also as a reminder for studies, pilots, and capital projects, it is a 2-step process. So you first complete your initial proposal. We'll get back to you confirming eligibility within 15 business days, and then kind of go through the approval process upon receiving your full application.
Great, thank you. I've had a few questions come in, so I'll just sort of lump it into a broad question. Perhaps you could speak to the difference between rental units being eligible versus home ownership or deferred home ownership models.
Sure.
Yes.
Do you want me to, Benjamin, do you want to go? Okay. Do you have anything to add? Please do. So at this time, affordable home ownership programs are not eligible. We're focused on affordable rental models, be it supportive housing, transitional housing, or just kind of non-market affordable rentals. You know, part of what's driving that rationale is that while $300 million is a lot of money, it's actually, you know, in the context of the need and other funding out there in the sector, it's also not that much money. And so we had to be, you know, fairly focused in our approach and our impact, and through our consultation with the sector have focused in on the rental units.
Wonderful, thank you. For pilot projects, will municipalities have to come up with a new solution that are exclusive to others to be eligible, or will they still be eligible if 2 municipalities are trying to pilot a similar solution?
It's a very good question. I think we would look for slight differences in context that would demonstrate the additional knowledge value gained by running 2 simultaneous projects. In general, remember that a pilot is more about testing out an approach that will be rolled out at a broader scale later. So we really would look for each of the municipalities to be, or eligible applicants, to be proposing a project that could be constructed, just a few units to be renovated or new construction of a few units, with the intention of developing a much larger program that will adopt that approach later. So that's the key requirement to be a pilot. Of course, we look for innovation. We look for there to be some uncertainty that you'd like to resolve before you're able to move into the large scale capital project. So if there's uncertainty in both situations, I don't see why we couldn't entertain simultaneous pilots that are proposing similar things. But we certainly would look for context conditions that would say, oh yeah, we really do need to pilot this before we're ready to make the large scale investment in a capital project.
Great, thanks, Ben. Will any solar project be acceptable, or does the solar application need to be innovative beyond normal PV solar projects?
That's a great question. And the truth is that this is an energy efficiency program, not a renewable energy generation program. So whether it's a capital retrofit or a new construction of a building, there needs to be significant energy efficiency as part of the project. And in fact, for retrofits, no more than 10% of the amount of energy efficiency gains obtained through the project can be accounted for through new renewable energy generation. We look for a minimum of 15% reduction in the building energy demand before you can add in that 10% through your solar generation to achieve the minimum 25% energy reduction. It's a lot of numbers. I hope that was clear. No, solar panels don't need to be innovative. We know that they're run of the mill, and actually it is a little bit because of that we've said, okay, we're going to limit the role that solar panels have, especially for retrofit projects. Say that we really would like to focus on the efficiency, but renewable energy can kick the retrofit up a little bit.
Great, thank you. Since energy modeling is required, do you have a technical description of the modeling rules?
Not exactly. Generally, we try to align with CMHC, so most of the energy model requirements that they have would be also acceptable for us. Of course, some of our energy thresholds, our eligibility thresholds, are a little bit higher than CMHC, so your model would have to show that the project achieves those thresholds. Models are required for new construction, but for retrofit projects, we can accept just any standard practice calculation. So whether it's an ASHRAE audit, whether it's EnerGuide or EnerGuide evaluation, if that's appropriate for the building type, we could accept those as a demonstration of the energy savings achieved through a retrofit project. But for a new build, we need any conventional modeling approach, CanQuest, Energy Plus, any conventional modeling approach that can demonstrate the energy savings versus a baseline. So a conventional design building, and then the building that you're proposing, how much energy is being saved, and then how do you account for the need for net zero. I'd also just like to mention that there are some limitations to installing on-site renewable energy generation in certain instances. Either the site is too dense, local regulations prohibit it, there are other technical barriers. So you'd evaluate those technical barriers at the study stage when you're submitting a net zero energy capital project proposal.
Great. Is there an accessibility requirement for projects receiving GMF funding?
Jen?
No, there's not an accessibility requirement. Through our evaluation process, we look at, social benefits is one of those, one of the areas that we ask you to speak to, and certainly accessibility could be considered through there, although it's not required.
It's also important to note, though, that if you're, for example, getting partial funding through another program that requires accessibility, or you want to just improve the accessibility of your building to better serve your tenants, you could still apply for capital funding. As long as you meet the energy threshold, you can include accessibility in your scope of work for the retrofit and get reimbursed for it.
Actually, just as a tag on to that, is funding available for construction materials outside of just the energy efficiency measures?
Yes.
Yes, we can fund 80% of the total costs of a retrofit project, including energy and non-energy retrofits, and we can fund 20% of the total costs of a new construction project, including energy and non-energy costs, with the knowledge that that 20% represents approximately the total value of energy-related costs in an average case.
Yeah, we recognize that, you know, in best practice in doing a retrofit, if you're, you know, taking on certain components of the building, it would just be best practice to do other non-energy related improvements at that same time, and we want to encourage, you know, good projects. So absolutely.
Great. Bouncing back to the solar PV question, in understanding the position on solar, are batteries also included in that 10%, or are they seen as new innovation?
It's a fascinating question because batteries obviously can reduce your GHG loads by taking away energy from peak period energy demand and shifting it to off-peak when you'd recharge your batteries. So if you had a large battery array, you could run it when the province is firing up its gas generators, so that the battery is actually offsetting that demand on the gas, and then recharge your batteries when there's not very much demand out there. Sorry, this is a technical explanation. Recharge your batteries basically when energy is at its cheapest and cleanest. So it's definitely something that could be included in the scope of work of the study. I don't know if we would necessarily accept it as an efficiency measure, because it really is just about shifting the load. It's not really about reducing the total demand. Overall, over the course of a year, you'd still consume the same number of kilowatt hours or gigajoules. It's just when that load happens. So it's certainly play in your favor, but it may not increase the percentage of efficiency gained, which is the key indicator for the project. But certainly innovation, and if you're looking at the point scoring system that Jen described, that kind of innovation would definitely be viewed favorably in the project evaluation.
Wonderful, thank you. Do you have a template for the feasibility study?
There's no template for the feasibility study at this time. We do have examples we can share of successful feasibility studies that have been completed through GMF programs. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We'd be happy to share past examples of complete feasibility studies. It really is, we hope that you can work through the planning stage to identify the scope of work you want covered in the study stage, or look at best examples and develop a proposed study model from there. The main reason is because jurisdictions are different. There's different expectations that will be done in different projects. So it's impossible to really design a single catch-all study that would guarantee every possible scenario that may need to be investigated. If it's a retrofit, you just never know what kinds of things are relevant to this retrofit that may not be relevant to that one. But if you've got questions about that, don't hesitate to call. We'll listen to you. I won't just talk the whole time. And of course, Jessica, who's here on the call with us, would be happy to give some guidance in that regard.
Great, thanks, Benjamin. Could you speak a little bit to the interest rate on the loans?
I would refer to our credit analyst. There's a range of rates available. They're based on the term of the loan as well as on the type of applicant. So there is a bit of a range of interest rates available there. Overall, what we try to do is create a financing package that's very competitive, that enables you to pursue an ambitious sustainability project. So we want to remove the financial barriers to carrying out these types of projects. Certainly with a 50% grant for new builds, that significantly more than offsets any interest that will ever be charged over the life of the loan. And then with retrofits, again, the range of grant amount is 25 to 50% of the amount that you apply for. So generally large grants associated that that offset. Market competitive loan rates. Market competitive loan rates and terms of 10, 20, or up to 30 years in certain cases, depending on your preferences.
Great. We have a couple of questions left. Please feel free, of course, if there's any new questions coming up for you, to add them into the chat box, and we'll get through them before the end of the webinar. Beyond the important GHG reductions of new construction and retrofit projects, how important in the evaluation process are other environmental features of the project? For example, recycling of materials, green products, red list materials for living building challenge, etc.
All of those environmental benefits will be considered. We basically have kind of two sections in terms of how we're looking at environmental benefits, one being the energy efficiency improvements and the GHG reductions, and those are the weighted the most heavily. They are the most important, but certainly we look at kind of all the other potential environmental benefits on a project, including any of the ones that you've listed, and there's a number of examples in the application guide as well, that we will take a look at and consider as part of our evaluation as well.
Great. I believe this is the final question, unless a few more come in. For retrofits, is there any requirement to account for embodied carbon? Most retrofits done in conventional manners, such as spray foam, standard windows, etc., actually create more GHGs in their manufacturing and distribution than they'll save in emissions by efficiency over 30 years.
I have to change my answer to an earlier question. We do have guidelines on the study contents, and the guidelines on the study contents include a life cycle analysis of your proposed retrofit. So you'll be able to show in your life cycle analysis that by choosing a certain material over another one, you're able to reduce the embodied carbon in the building, or the additional carbon emitted in order to buy your retrofit materials. And again, it is looked upon favorably at the review stage. So a life cycle analysis will include, the construction emissions, the operations emissions, and the decommissioning emissions. While we do base the grant amounts for retrofits on the operation phase, it certainly is important to look at the overall life cycle of any project.
Great, thank you. Do you have any examples of pilot projects that you can share that have a goal of energy reduction rather than the creation of alternate energy?
I didn't share an example of a pilot project for a building energy retrofit. I'd have to get back to you on that. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Thank you. Unless any further questions come in, I believe that covers them for today. I'll just give a few more minutes. While I give you an extra couple of seconds to jot down any questions that you had, thank you for your patience with the handout. Unfortunately, it was not working. We will ensure that that is sent out in an email summarizing the question or the answers to the questions that were asked today. And the presentation will also be available on our website in the coming weeks, both with the audio and video of today's webinar, and the handout will be included there. So apologies for that. I do want to thank Jen and Benjamin for providing the details on who's eligible and the types of projects that we can fund through the SAW initiative. Thanks to all the participants. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I hope we can continue the discussion and talk about your specific project soon. Please feel free to join our next webinar, Water, Invest in Your Community's Most Important Resource. From water conservation to stormwater quality to septic wastewater systems, this webinar will outline the different ways GMF funding can improve and protect your community's water systems. Tune in and learn about the application process, the types of projects that are eligible, and examples of how municipalities have used GMF funding to manage their local bodies of water. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to fill out the short survey that will pop up once we end the webinar today. Your feedback will be useful for us to better plan our future webinars. So unless there's any further questions, I believe we will wrap up for the afternoon.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Hope to talk to you soon.